Today, I'm going to tell you a story so intense it leaves a mark, unfolding beneath the wide, merciless skies of the Wild West. A place where fate doesn't ask for permission, and one wrong step can bind strangers together for life. It started with a single choice, made in fear, but destined to ignite something far greater than survival. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Cowboy, don't look. Just my dress is gone with the Apache woman behind the waterfall. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Mason Hale reached the canyon near mid-afternoon, the sun hitting the stone walls in a way that made the air feel hotter than the open plains behind him. He had been riding since sunrise, stopping only once to check the worn leather straps on a saddle and to give his mare, Bramble, a short rest. His work as a horse trader often kept him moving between scattered settlements, but this trip had a different weight behind it. He was on his way to deliver Tamaras to a rancher north of the canyon, hoping the payment would cover the feed and supplies he needed for the next few months. Money was always tight, and he tried to avoid staying in one town long enough for anyone to ask about his past. His past never left him, even when no one asked. Years earlier, he had worked with a scout group that patrolled disputed regions along the frontier. One choice he made during a tense night, raid, resulted in deaths he still replayed in his mind. Since then, he kept a quiet work, stayed away from crowds, and avoided situations that required trust. The canyon, with its narrow paths and stretches of silence, suited him. He preferred land that kept its distance. He guided Bramble toward the small waterfall he knew from previous travels. Water collected in a shaded pool at the bottom, providing one of the few reliable drinking spots in this barren region. As they approached, Mason slowed his pace, scanning the ground automatically for fresh sign, tracks, disturbed sand, anything to suggest he wasn't alone. He saw nothing unusual, so he dismounted. The air near the water felt cooler. He loosened the bridle so Bramble could drink freely. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove, relieved to rest for a few minutes before pushing on. As he knelt to refill his canteen, a faint sound reached him. It wasn't the fall of water or the shifting of his mare's hooves. It was a breath short, tight, and uneven, like someone trying to steady themselves. Mason froze, his instinct sharpened at once. He had survived too many close encounters during his years as a scout to ignore something so small. He didn't reach for his gun, but let his hand rest near the holster, ready if he needed it. He stood slowly and turned his head only enough to check the edges of the canyon. Nothing moved in the open. The sound had come from behind the falling water. He kept his voice calm and controlled. Someone there. For several seconds there was no answer. Then a woman spoke, her words strained but deliberate. "Don't look at me. Please. I need help." The tone hit him harder than the request itself. She wasn't hiding to ambush him. She was hiding because she didn't want to be seen. Mason stepped back from the water to show he wasn't approaching. "Tell me what you need." "My clothing was taken by the current," she said. "I have nothing to cover myself with." He understood immediately. Without speaking further, he unbuckled his long coat and walked to a flat rock near the pool, placing it there gently. He kept his eyes downward, making sure she heard the distance between his steps. "The coat's here. Take your time." He returned to Bramble's side, ensuring he wasn't blocking her path if she needed space to emerge. Behind the waterfall, movement stirred. The figure stepped out slowly, keeping most of her body angled away. The coat wrapped around her frame, her hands gripping the fabric with a tense, protective hold. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with long black hair hanging wet against her back and shoulders. Her breathing was controlled but shaky. Mason didn't lift his eyes higher than her face. Even that felt like more attention than she wanted. He noticed the exhaustion in her expression and the strain in her posture, as if she had run far before reaching this place. She adjusted the coat once more before speaking. "My name is Asha, Mason Hale," he said. "You hurt anywhere?" She hesitated before answering. "My foot. I hit a rock when I jumped from the path above. Let me see from where you're standing," he said, keeping distance. She shifted her weight, extending her leg slightly so he could assess her without stepping closer. Her ankle showed a visible bruise swollen around the bone. "You'll walk slower, but you can still walk," he said. Asha nodded. Her eyes flicked towards the canyon entrance, checking for movement. "They chased me into here." "Ooh," Mason asked quietly. "Raiders," she said. "I don't know how many, but they scatter my group. I ran until I couldn't hear them anymore." Mason evaluated the canyon walls, listening for any echo that didn't belong. He didn't hear pursuit, but he also knew riders could move silently when they wanted to. The possibility of danger changed his priorities. His delivery job could wait, keeping her alive couldn't. "I know a shelter not far from here," he said. "Old Crow's place," Caleb said. "We'll get you out of the open." Naya studied him in silence, weighing every detail, trying to decide whether trusting him would cost her more than refusing him. Caleb saw the struggle written plainly on her face. She needed protection, but she also knew what it meant to rely on a stranger. "You walk ahead of me," he said evenly. "I'll stay back. You set the pace." She drew in a long breath, held it, then nodded. "All right." They left the pool behind. Her steps were careful, measured. His were quiet and unhurried. Naya glanced back more than once, not out of fear of him, but because her body hadn't yet shaken the panic of being hunted. Caleb didn't comment and didn't rush her. He matched her speed, never calling attention to the injured foot slowing her down. The canyon tightened into narrow turns. The sound of the waterfall faded, replaced by wind scraping along stone. Caleb noticed how Naya pulled the coat closer with every gust, how her shoulders slowly eased when no danger appeared for several minutes. He watched without staring, alert to threats, mindful of her discomfort. Even soaked and shaken, she carried herself with dignity, standing straight under the weight of fear she hadn't yet released. "What were you doing out here?" Caleb asked, keeping his voice neutral. "My family was moving camp," Naya said quietly. "We tried to stay clear of trouble. It found us anyway." He didn't press her. The truth in her voice needed no testing. As they walked, Caleb weighed his choices. He hadn't planned on taking anyone with him. Responsibility was something he'd learned to avoid when he could, but leaving her alone in a canyon after a raid wasn't something he could live with. He made the decision without speaking it aloud. He would see her safe, no matter how far it pulled him off his road. Naya slowed as the ground leveled ahead. She lifted her hand and pointed weakly toward a rise of stone half hidden by brush. "That the shelter?" "Yes," Caleb said. "Almost there." She let out the first real breath of relief he'd seen. He noticed it and said nothing, falling into step beside her. They both understood something had shifted the moment she stepped out from behind the waterfall. With every step away from it, the drip of water disappeared, replaced by sand scraping under boots and wind sliding through rock. Naya favored her good side, careful not to show the limp. Caleb caught every shortened step, every tightened breath. He didn't mention it. Calling attention to pain only sharpened it, and she was already holding herself together by will alone. He stayed a few paces behind her. Close enough that she wouldn't feel exposed. Far enough that she wouldn't feel trapped. He knew how quickly freedom could feel stolen. Years with the frontier scouts had taught him that survival wasn't just strength. It was giving frightened people room to breathe. Naya glanced back every few minutes. Each time, Caleb was still there, walking with the same steady rhythm. His attention split between her movement and the land around them. Slowly, she understood. He wasn't guarding her. He was watching for what she couldn't see. They reached a bend where the canyon opened into a shallow basin dotted with scrub. Caleb stopped without a word, signaling rest. Naya lowered herself onto a flat rock, pulling the coat over her legs. Wet hair clung to the fabric, chilling her fast. She wrapped her arms around herself, waiting for the shaking to pass as the rush of adrenaline faded. Caleb stayed several feet away, letting the silence work before he spoke. "How long were you running?" "Since morning," she said, exhaustion rough in her voice. "I thought I could outrun them. The canyon turned me around. When I reached the water, I didn't know where else to go." "Anyone else make it out?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. It happened fast. When the fire started, I lost everyone." Something tightened in Caleb's chest. He knew that feeling too well. He remembered camps breaking apart in terror, innocent people scattering while soldiers or raiders tore through the night. He wasn't proud of the part he'd played back then. The memory anchored him here, keeping him beside her instead of riding on alone. Naya watched him scan the canyon walls. "You hear everything," she said softly. "Habit," Caleb replied. "Keeps me alive." Her gaze lingered, searching for exaggeration, for false bravado. She found none, only a man shaped by experience. When she stood again, stiffness crept into her steps. Caleb slowed without comment, adjusting his pace so she never felt pushed forward. Caleb said nothing when she paused to brace herself against the stone wall. Instead, he shifted slightly ahead of her, positioning himself so his shadow cut the worst of the sun while she caught her breath. "Why are you traveling alone?" Naya asked, wiping moisture from her brow. "Work," he answered. "Trading, deliveries, keeps me fed, keeps me moving." "Moving from what?" He didn't reply right away. His eyes stayed on the narrow slit of sky above the canyon. "From things I don't want catching up to me," he said at last. She accepted that without pressing. The weight in his voice explained more than words could. The ground began to rise, the slope warning them they were close. Naya hesitated before climbing the short incline, the uneven rock testing her bruised ankle. Caleb stepped beside her, not reaching for her, just close enough to steady her if she chose it. She didn't take his arm, but she stayed within reach, knowing it was there. At the top, the shelter came into view. Old Crow's place, small, weather-beaten, half hidden by brush. The roof sagged to one side, the entrance barely wide enough for a single body to slip through. Smoke stains marked the stone, proof it had once been used, though it now looked abandoned. Naya stared at it, relief tangled with doubt. "No one's inside," Caleb said. "Checked it last season." "Empty then?" she asked. "Likely still is." She let out a slow breath. "It's better than the canyon." Caleb nodded and approached carefully, circling rather than walking straight in. Naya watched him move, how his shoulders tightened, how his steps went quiet, how his hand stayed close to his weapon without touching it. That was when she understood. He wasn't just passing through the land. He'd been shaped by danger. He entered first, scanning every corner. Only after he was certain did he turn and give a brief nod. "Safe." Naya stepped inside, pulling the coat tighter. The air was dry and still. The shade wrapped around her like a barrier, offering more comfort than the open canyon ever could. She leaned against the stone wall and breathed slowly, letting the panic loosen its grip. Caleb lingered near the doorway, watching her settle before moving aside. He didn't tell her where to sit, or ask her to explain anything. She'd given more of herself in one afternoon than most people did in months. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes lowered. "For stopping." for not leaving. He studied her quietly. Exhaustion colored her voice, but it carried something stronger beneath it, a refusal to break. "I wasn't going to leave you out there," he said. Naya looked up then, meeting his eyes for the first time without flinching. "Good," she said, "because I don't think I would have made it alone." Caleb didn't smile. He only nodded, accepting the truth as it was. Outside, the sun dropped lower, stretching long shadows through the broken roof slats. Inside, Naya drew her knees beneath the coat, conserving warmth. Caleb stood near the entrance, listening for any sound that didn't belong. Neither of them spoke it, but both knew their lives had shifted the moment she whispered for help behind the waterfall. The shelter smelled faintly of old smoke and dry earth, the kind of scent that lingered long after abandonment. Stacked stone and rough logs held the last light of day, leaving the room dim but not dark. Water dripped from Naya's hair onto the cracked dirt floor as she moved farther inside. Caleb set his saddlebags near the doorway, choosing a spot that gave him a clear view of both the entrance and the room. It wasn't a habit. It was instinct he couldn't turn off. He pulled a bundle of brush from his bag and crouched at the fire pit, testing the charred remains left behind by whoever had once stayed there. Some pieces were still dry. Naya watched him work, noticing the deliberate way he arranged each stick. "You've done this a lot," she said softly. "More than I ever planned to," he replied. She sat on a low ledge along the back wall, drawing her knees close. The coat helped, but the cold from the wet fabric underneath made her shiver. She rubbed her arms, trying to chase the chill. Caleb noticed and slid the brush closer to the pit. "It'll warm quick," he said, striking a match. The flame caught fast, sending a dull glow across the floor. Firelight picked out the strain in Naya's eyes, the tight set of her jaw, the guarded look that didn't fade even when she thanked him. Caleb fed thicker wood into the fire, building it slow and steady. When it was enough, he moved back, giving her space. The crackle softened the silence, rounding off its sharp edges. Naya exhaled, some of the weight inside her finally easing. Naya wasn't fully at ease yet, but she was no longer close to breaking. She pressed the edge of her foot against the stone wall, testing her balance. Pain flared up her ankle and she winced. "Does it hurt bad?" Caleb asked. "Manageable," she said. "I've walked through worse." The words carried the weight of someone who had learned endurance out of need, not choice. "You should rest it tonight," he told her. "Pushing it will only make it worse." She didn't argue. After a moment, her voice came again, steadier now, though still cautious. "Why were you out here alone?" Caleb's eyes shifted to the fire. "Taking horses north. That's the work. Keeps me fed. Keeps me away from places I don't want to go back to." "What places?" He paused, deciding how much to give. He didn't owe her an explanation, but something about her quiet, direct curiosity made him answer. "Old towns," he said. "Camps I worked around. Too many memories." She watched him closely, catching the faint, hard edge in his expression. "People you lost?" "Yes," he said flatly. "People I should have protected." She didn't push for more. She knew that feeling, loss that lingered long after danger passed, blame that never quite loosened its grip. The silence between them shifted. It wasn't tense anymore. It was shared. Outside, wind brushed through the canyon, slipping through cracks in the wood with a low whistle. Naya pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders. She hadn't felt safe for days, maybe weeks, and the contrast between running through dust and ravines and sitting by a fire with another human being felt almost unreal. Caleb noticed her eyes tracking the corners of the shelter. "No one's coming tonight," he said. "I checked for tracks on the way in. Ground behind us is clean. Her jaw eased slightly. "Thank you for checking." He nodded once, accepting her trust without comment. Naya shifted closer to the fire, letting the stone behind her soak up the warmth. She stared into the flames, her voice low and steady. "When the Black Spur Gang hit us, we had only minutes. They came down from the South Ridge. I never saw their faces, just the torches." "You did what you had to," Caleb said. "I left everything," she murmured. "Everything I owned, everything I knew." He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He didn't offer hollow comfort. He simply added another piece of wood to the fire, giving her what she needed most: steady heat, something solid. "You'll get through this," he said. Naya didn't look at him, but she nodded. Her breathing slowed as the fire strengthened, the warmth easing the last of her shivers. For the first time since stepping out from behind the waterfall, her shoulders dropped fully, releasing tension she'd been holding for far too long. Caleb leaned back near the door, settling into a position that let him rest without lowering his guard. Firelight flickered in Naya's eyes as her gaze finally softened. For now, danger felt distant. She wasn't running. He wasn't alone. Neither of them said it out loud, but the shift was unmistakable. They had stepped into each other's lives without planning to, and neither pulled away. The fire crackled on as the sun disappeared behind the canyon walls. Naya slowly lay on her side, clutching the coat, trusting the shelter for the first time since she entered it. Caleb stayed awake a while longer, listening to the land, keeping watch, not because she asked, but because it felt right. Night settled fully over the canyon as the fire burned down to a steady glow, casting amber lines across the rough stone. Naya had stopped shivering, her body adjusting to the warmth filling the room. He could see how tired she was, her eyelids drifting shut, then opening again whenever a distant sound reached her. Even half asleep, she stayed alert, proof of how long she'd survived on her own. Caleb sat near the entrance, one knee raised, back braced against the frame. He looked relaxed, but he wasn't. Every few minutes, his head tilted slightly, listening for anything out of place. Shifting rocks, disturbed brush, hooves where there shouldn't be any. Years with the frontier scouts had sharpened those instincts, and he'd never been able to turn them off. Naya shifted on the stone ledge, pulling the coat higher around her neck. "Do you stay awake this late every night?" she asked softly, her voice worn with fatigue. "Most nights," Caleb answered. "Hard habit to break." She studied him in the firelight, the lines near his eyes, the set of his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his belt even while resting. He wasn't tense with fear. He carried tension the way some men carried tools, always there, ready. "You don't trust the dark," she said. He considered it. "I trust it to hide things that shouldn't be hidden." Naya held his gaze for a few seconds longer, trying to understand the part of him she hadn't asked about yet. She wondered what he had lived through to make him this watchful. "I used to sleep easily," Naya said quietly, "before the raids started closing in on our camps. After that, every sound felt like danger." "You're safe right now," Caleb said, not as a promise, but as a simple fact. "No tracks near the entrance, no fresh sign, nothing followed us." She nodded, trusting the certainty in his voice more than reassurance. "Do you think the Black Spur Gang will keep searching?" "They scatter once they lose the trail," he answered. "They don't double back unless there's a reason." "What kind of reason?" Caleb met her eyes. She understood before he spoke it. Value. The Black Spur Gang didn't hunt out of anger. They chased what could be traded, taken, or used. "I don't have anything they want," she said, though tension crept into her voice. "You got away," Caleb replied. That's usually enough for them to move on. Silence settled, heavy but not hostile. Outside, the wind shifted, pushing sand across the entrance in soft, scraping waves. Naya eased onto her back, testing how much her ankle could bear. Pain flared briefly before she steadied herself. Caleb caught it. Lift it a little, he said, nodding toward a nearby flat stone. Takes the pressure off. She adjusted carefully, resting her heel on the stone. Relief came slow but sure. Thank you, she murmured. Caleb turned his focus back to the entrance, eyes scanning moonlight leaking through the cracks. Ash stood tied just outside, calm, alert. Her quiet snort drifted in now and then. Horses sensed danger quicker than most men, and her ease told him they were likely secure. Naya shifted again, propping herself on one elbow. You said you left places behind. What kind of places? Caleb didn't answer right away. Talking about the past always stirred things he preferred buried. But her question wasn't prying. It came from someone trying to understand the man who had stepped into danger for her. Camps, he said finally. Scouting routes. That life wears a person down if they stay too long. Why did you stay as long as you did? Duty, he said, or what I thought was duty. He paused, then added, when a call goes wrong, it stays with you. You don't forget the faces. Her eyes softened. You carry them with you. Every day, he said, low and steady. Naya settled back down, drawing the coat over her shoulders. She didn't try to comfort him. She knew words couldn't wash away guilt. Instead, she offered something quieter, understanding without intrusion. You helped me today, she said. That matters. Caleb didn't answer, but she noticed the smallest release in his posture, a easing in the rigid line of his shoulders. The fire popped, sending a single ember drifting up before it vanished. Naya's breathing slowed into an even rhythm, the kind that came just before sleep. Her hand rested near the edge of the coat, fingers loosely curled, still wary of the world, but trusting it more than she had hours ago. Caleb stayed awake, eyes half-lidded, listening to the canyon as if the land itself might warn him. He didn't resent the weight of watching over her. Protecting someone gave shape to a life that had drifted too long without direction. Near midnight, Naya stirred. Her voice came soft, unguarded. You'll wake me if something happens? You'll know before I do, Caleb said. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. Then she let her eyes close, breath evening out as sleep finally took her without a fight. Caleb watched as the fire dimmed, his presence steady, unmoving. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone in the dark, and it didn't feel heavy. A pale gray light crept into the shelter well before the sun cleared the canyon rim. Caleb was already awake, sitting against the doorway with his arms resting loosely on his knees. He hadn't slept, but he didn't look worn. Men who'd spent years on patrol learned how to rest without closing their eyes. Outside, Ash let out a quiet breath, signaling dawn. Naya stirred on the stone ledge, fingers tightening briefly around the coat before memory caught up with her. Her eyes opened slowly. She lay still for a moment, listening, feeling the last warmth of the fire, orienting herself. Then recognition settled in. You stayed awake all night, she said, her voice rough with sleep. I rested enough, Caleb said. Didn't want anything catching us off guard. Naya studied him in the pale morning light filtering through the broken roof. His posture was steady, controlled, but his face carried a different kind of fatigue, the sort that settled in the mind rather than the body. She wondered how many dawns he'd greeted like this before their paths crossed. You didn't have to keep watch alone, she said. I know, he replied, but you needed the sleep more than I did. Outside, a low gust pushed sand across the doorway. Caleb stood and rolled his shoulders, working the stiffness out. The sun hadn't reached the canyon floor yet, but the air was warmer than it had been overnight. Naya tested her ankle, setting her foot down carefully. Pain sparked sharp at first, then eased. She breathed out, relieved she could bear her weight. Caleb caught the adjustment in her stance. Still sore, she said. Not like last night. I can walk. Don't push it, he said. She shrugged lightly. We can't afford to stay. He knew she was right. Raids didn't stay put. If the Black Spur Gang shifted their pattern, they could pass through this canyon without warning. Caleb knelt by the fire pit, breaking apart the remaining embers and burying them with dirt. He worked methodically, leaving no trace, no scattered ash, no careless marks. Naya watched, noting how deliberate he was, even with small things. He moved like a man who knew how to vanish when he needed to. Where do you go after this? She asked. North, he said. 2 horses still need delivering. He paused. After that, depends on where the road takes me. The answer didn't surprise her. Caleb wasn't a man who planned far ahead. He drifted from place to place like he was outrunning something that never moved. Naya stood, pulling the coat tighter around herself, rubbing warmth into her arms. The chill from yesterday's water still clung to her skin. I'll need clothes before we go far. We'll look around the canyon, Caleb said. Hunters leave scraps sometimes. Might be enough for you to make something. Her brows lifted slightly. You know how to find what most people miss. Years of walking alone, he said. She stepped toward the entrance and paused beside him, scanning the canyon with the same caution he'd shown all night. It looked empty, but emptiness never meant safe. Why did you help me? She asked suddenly. Most men would have kept riding. Caleb met her gaze without flinching. Because you needed someone to stop. The simplicity of it tightened her throat. She wasn't used to kindness without strings. It unsettled her. Not dangerously, but like something she didn't yet know how to hold. Caleb stepped out first, checking the ground before motioning her forward. Ash stood tied nearby, calm, tail flicking once as they approached, alert but unbothered. Naya walked slowly, careful with her ankle. She reached out and brushed Ash's neck, fingers sinking into the warm coat. The mare let out a soft snort. She likes you, Caleb said. Naya almost smiled. She's calmer than most people. Caleb tightened the saddle straps while Naya kept watch on the canyon walls. In daylight, the path ahead looked different. Clearer, less threatening. Hope stirred, cautious and fragile. She didn't let herself hold it too tightly. We'll head upstream first, Caleb said, securing the reins. Hunters work near water. Naya nodded. Lead. I'll keep pace. They moved together through the canyon, their steps settling into an unspoken rhythm. Naya checked behind her less often now. Caleb noticed and said nothing, but something inside him eased all the same. Near a cluster of boulders, they found the remains of an old camp, a broken frame once used for tanning hides, a few scraps left behind, a length of cord stiff with age. Naya crouched, studying the pieces with practiced eyes. I can work with this, she said. I've made clothes from worse. Caleb watched her fingers move, tying knots with quiet efficiency, saying nothing as she worked. Her fingers moved with an ease that spoke of hard-earned skill, the kind learned through months of isolation and necessity. You've been on your own a long time, Caleb said. Too long, Naya answered. Surviving isn't the same as living. He hadn't expected her to say it so plainly. The words struck deeper than he let show. Naya lifted her head and met his eyes without hesitation. And you? She asked. Have you been living? Caleb closed his bag slowly. I've been moving, he said after a moment. Not sure that counts. She held his gaze, then gave a small nod, as if something about him had finally settled into place. You're not finished yet, she said. We keep going. Both of us. Caleb felt the truth of it more than the meaning. As they returned to the shelter to gather what little they had, a different kind of quiet settled between them. Steady, unafraid. They weren't alone anymore, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them pushed that thought away. By late morning, the sun climbed high enough to warm the canyon walls, throwing long, sharp shadows across the ground. Naya spread the scraps of hide they'd gathered across a flat stone outside the shelter. The pieces were rough and uneven, but she studied each one carefully, already planning how to shape them into something wearable. Her hands worked with steady precision, testing thickness, choosing where each strip belonged. A short distance away, Caleb repaired a loose beam above the shelter entrance, using a small hatchet to trim cracked wood with controlled, careful strokes. The quiet chop of metal against wood echoed lightly, a sound that grounded her more than she expected. For months, she'd relied only on her own movements and breath. Now another presence filled the space without pressing in on her. You've done this kind of work before? She asked, glancing up. Ranch work, Caleb said. You fix things right if you want them to last. She threaded a strip of hide through a hole she'd cut, pulling it tight with practiced ease. I learned to sew because no one else wanted to, she said. Then everyone expected it. You don't seem to mind work, he said. I mind having no choice, she replied. Today, I'm choosing. That makes it different. Caleb took that in without comment, appreciating the certainty behind her words. The sun climbed higher, warming stone and skin alike. Naya continued sorting the hides, measuring and shaping them into panels. Caleb moved along the roofline, trimming and reinforcing weak sections with steady hands. She watched him for a moment, noticing how he never stood directly behind her, never moved too suddenly. He stayed at the edge of her awareness, present but not intrusive. It gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. When she shifted back to her work, pain pulsed through her ankle and she faltered slightly. Caleb noticed at once. You need to sit for a bit, he said. You've been on it all morning. I'm fine, she protested softly, even as she lowered herself down. Pride rose first, as it always did, but she didn't ignore the pain. Caleb set his tools aside and crouched near her, leaving space so she wouldn't feel crowded. You're pushing yourself because you want to be useful, he said. Resting doesn't make you a burden. Naya met his eyes, searching his face. What she saw wasn't pity. It was simple, practical concern. I'm not used to anyone noticing when I'm struggling, she admitted. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be seen, he replied. She took a slow breath and let the words settle. After a few quiet minutes, she returned to the hides, working at a calmer pace. Caleb went back to the shelter, securing loose sections with branches he'd trimmed earlier. The day moved forward with an easy rhythm. Shared work, brief exchanges, long silences that felt natural instead of strained. As Naya shaped the outline of the dress, she caught herself watching Caleb's hands. They were strong, sure, but careful in a way that surprised her. Most men she'd known forced their way through tasks. Caleb didn't. He handled each piece of wood as if rushing might break something that mattered. You're gentle with things, she said. He paused mid-swing. Not always, Caleb said, but I'm trying. Naya nodded, appreciating that he didn't pretend otherwise. When the midday heat pressed down harder, Caleb took a water skin from Ash and brought it over. She accepted it without hesitation. Hours earlier, she might have stiffened at the closeness. Now she drank, wiped her mouth, and handed it back with quiet ease. Getting some color back, he said, noticing the warmth returning to her face. Starting to feel like myself again. That's good, he replied. Means you're healing. Naya went back to sewing, fingers threading narrow strips of hide in small, even pulls. Healing isn't only physical, she said softly. Sometimes it starts when someone treats you like you matter. Caleb looked at her then, really looked. His eyes carried a quiet recognition, an understanding shaped by a life that hadn't been gentle to either of them. You matter, he said, plain and steady. She held his gaze and didn't look away. The words settled fully, and something in her posture eased just a fraction. By mid-afternoon, the rough shape of the dress had taken form. It wasn't fine work, but it was strong and covered her well. She stood to test it, bracing one hand against the canyon wall. Caleb glanced over, checking her comfort without staring. It fits, she said. Not perfect, but it'll do. It's solid work, he answered. A small smile found her. Thank you for finding the materials. Thank you for turning them into something, he replied. The exchange was simple, but something real passed between them. A shared understanding that they were working as one. As the sun dropped toward the western ridge, the air cooled. Caleb gathered his tools while Naya folded the remaining scraps for later repairs. We should move tomorrow, he said. This shelter did its job, but staying risks drawing attention. She nodded, fear and resolve balanced in her expression. I trust your judgment. Caleb strapped his gear onto Ash and glanced back as Naya tightened the belt of her new dress. She looked stronger than the day before, more grounded, more sure. We leave at dawn, he said. I'll be ready. They stood together outside the shelter as the last light faded, neither of them in a hurry. It was the first full day they'd worked side by side, and both felt the shift. They weren't two strangers thrown together anymore. Something steadier had begun. Unexpected, but real. Evening settled heavier than the night before, the kind of quiet that comes when people finally have space to think instead of react. The sun slipped behind the far ridge, leaving the canyon washed in fading gold before shadows took it. They gathered what little they'd prepared. Caleb's supplies, repaired saddle gear, and the scraps Naya planned to turn into pouches later. She adjusted the dress again, smoothing seams tied with hide strips. It wasn't comfortable yet, but it would hold. She stepped outside to stretch her ankle, letting the cool air ease the lingering ache. Caleb set a small pot near the fire pit and poured in their last clean water, planning a simple brew from dried herbs he carried for long rides. You're moving better, he said. Still sore, she answered, but manageable. You don't need to push tomorrow, he said. She tipped her head slightly. You worry a lot. He tied the pot handle with a strip of cloth to keep it steady. I've lost enough people to be careful. She sat on a rock near the fire, knees drawn in. People close to you. And people I rode with, he said. For years. Some I barely knew. Losing them feels the same. She listened to the weight in his voice. He didn't avoid the truth, but he didn't welcome it either. He spoke like a man who'd spent a long time carrying the past without letting it crush him. What made you leave that life? She asked. Caleb stirred the fire with a stick, nudging embers together. A choice that wasn't mine to make, he said. I took a risk trying to protect a group of Dry Creek settlers. The timing was wrong. He stopped, jaw set. They paid for it. Naya exhaled slowly. You still blame yourself? He didn't deny it. Every day, Caleb said, but blame doesn't undo anything. Naya studied him, seeing the quiet struggle he carried beneath his calm. You helped me without hesitation, she said. A man who didn't care would have ridden on. That doesn't erase what came before, he replied. No, Naya said softly. But it shows who you still are. Caleb didn't answer. His gaze shifted to her, and something in his expression eased, just slightly. The broth simmered, and he poured a small portion into a tin cup, handing it to her. She took it with both hands, breathing in the steam before sipping. It was plain, earthy, but warm enough to settle her empty stomach. This is better than anything I've eaten in weeks, she said. You must have been running a long time, he said. Long enough to forget what a quiet night feels like. They ate without speaking, the fire casting steady light around them. Naya felt her muscles loosen, not because danger was gone, but because she wasn't facing the next morning alone. Caleb stayed close enough to reassure her, yet far enough that she never felt boxed in. His awareness of distance surprised her more with each passing hour. When she set the cup aside, she stared into the flames. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Caleb turned fully toward her. Go on. When the Black Spur Gang hit my camp, it wasn't random, she said. They were following a trail. Someone told them which route we were taking. You're sure? Yes, they knew exactly where to strike. They went straight for the women's tents. Caleb's jaw tightened. That means they may not be scattered. They could be moving through these canyons again. That's why I don't want to slow us down tomorrow, she said. They won't find our trail, he said firmly. We leave early. I'll keep us ahead of them. She held his gaze. She trusted the certainty in his voice, not because it was comforting, but because it was precise, spoken by someone who understood the land and its dangers. She edged closer to the fire, warming her legs. The sky had gone fully dark, stars visible through narrow breaks in the canyon walls. The wind sharpened, and she pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders. Caleb stood, stretched, and brought over more branches. As he set them down, Naya reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his wrist. The touch was brief, barely there, but it startled them both. She withdrew her hand, cautious rather than embarrassed. I didn't mean... It's fine, Caleb said gently. He didn't step back. Naya studied his face in the firelight. The faint weariness around his eyes, the calm steadiness in his stance. He wasn't uncomfortable with her closeness. Just careful. I'm not used to being near anyone, she admitted. Neither am I, he said. We'll figure it out. Something inside her loosened, not all at once, but enough that her shoulders finally dropped. Once the fire settled, Caleb returned to his place near the doorway. Naya lay back on the stone ledge, letting the warmth ease her aching foot. Night air drifted in, carrying the distant call of an owl. Will you sleep at all? She asked. Eventually, he said, once the canyon settles. She nodded and closed her eyes, trusting the quiet between them more than the land itself. Her breathing slowed, steady and even. Caleb listened, recognizing the rhythm that meant she'd stopped fighting sleep. He glanced at her once more before turning his attention to the dark beyond the doorway. Tomorrow held unknowns, but tonight, for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like a threat. Dawn crept over the ridge, thin light spilling into the canyon like a lifted curtain. The air was sharp with cold, cooler than the morning before. Naya woke to the soft scrape of Caleb's boots as he stepped outside to check the ground. Her body felt rested for the first time in many nights. Her ankle still ached, but the pain had dulled to something manageable. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes as the cool air washed over her. Caleb returned moments later, brushing dust from his gloves. "Tracks are old," he said. "Nothing fresh. We should move before the sun climbs." Naya stood carefully and tested her weight. It held, uncomfortable, but strong enough. She tightened the belt of her dress and stepped into the early light. "I'm ready," she said. Caleb nodded, adjusting Ash's cinch. "I'll lead the first stretch," he said. "The trail narrows in places. Stay close." Naya took her place just behind him. She didn't cling to his presence, but she stayed close enough that he could hear her steps. It wasn't fear guiding her anymore, just caution and respect for unfamiliar ground. They moved along the canyon floor, stone walls rising steep on both sides. Caleb kept his pace measured, guiding Ash over loose rock and dry patches. Naya matched him without complaint, her attention fixed on the winding path ahead. The coat was tied around her waist now, the sun warming the air. After a few minutes, she spoke quietly. "If I'd been alone today, I don't think I would have left the shelter." "You're not alone," Caleb said, not turning back. "Not while you're with me." She took the words in without reply. He hadn't spoken them like a promise meant to impress. Just a fact he intended to live by. At the first ridge, the land opened into a wide stretch of brush and scattered stone. Naya paused at the crest, eyes sweeping the distance. The wilderness spread out in every direction, a reminder of how exposed she'd been only days before. Caleb studied the horizon beside her. "We'll follow that line of trees," he said. "There's a stream past the bend. Fresh water will help us by midday." She nodded, grateful he explained his choices instead of expecting her to follow without question. They descended the slope, Ash stepping carefully behind them. Naya watched Caleb, how he scanned constantly, checked shadows without tension, slowed whenever the terrain shifted. Nothing he did was careless. "You know this area well?" she asked. "I've passed through every season for 5 years," he said. "Sold horses to a ranch north of here. Learned the safe routes the hard way." "What happened on the unsafe ones?" she asked, curious, not accusing. "I lost a good man to a flash flood," he said quietly. "Another to an ambush. Since then, I plan every mile." She didn't answer right away. She heard it not as a story, but as a map of survival. "You carry a lot," she said at last. "So do you," he replied. The trail narrowed between 2 stone outcrops. Naya stepped closer, and her hand brushed his arm as she steadied herself. Caleb didn't flinch. He glanced back, checking her footing. "You all right?" "Yes," she said. "Just loose stone." She didn't pull away this time. She stayed beside him as the canyon opened toward a broad, level plain. By late morning, they reached tall grass split by a slow-moving stream, its surface catching the bright sky. Caleb let Ash drink and refilled their water skin. Naya knelt nearby, rinsing dust from her hands and face. The water cooled the heat from the walk. Caleb watched briefly, noting the steadiness returning to her expression. Yesterday's tension had settled into something quieter. Resolve. She was still guarded, but she wasn't shrinking anymore. "We'll make better time across the plain," he said. "Less climbing." Naya stood and wiped her hands on her dress. "Where do we go after that?" "I was headed north to finish a delivery," he said, "but the road doesn't have to stay the same." She studied him closely. "Are you saying that for me? Or for yourself?" Caleb took a moment. For both, her expression shifted, soft, cautious, thoughtful. I don't want to hold you back from your work. You're not, he said. I'm choosing to walk with you. That's different. The honesty carried more weight than she expected. She'd spent months believing no one would ever choose to stay. Only endure. She stepped closer, movement slow and deliberate, and rested her hand lightly on his forearm. Her fingers curled just enough to be felt. This time she didn't pull away. Caleb stayed still, letting her decide the distance. Then we go north together, she said quietly. If that's what you want, he replied. It is. They continued along the stream, steps falling into an easy rhythm. The plains stretched wide ahead, yet neither felt exposed. What had formed between them was unspoken, but solid. For the first time since they met, the path didn't feel temporary. They were no longer two lives crossing by chance. They chose the same direction without hesitation, without looking back. By late afternoon, the open plain softened into a gradual rise scattered with juniper trees. The sky shifted into a lighter blue, stretched wide and empty of clouds. The land felt different here, calmer, steadier, and Naya slowed as she took it in. Something in the stillness pulled at her. Her shoulders eased, her breathing loosened. Caleb guided Ash up the slope and stopped at the crest. Below them, a small valley opened wide. Sheltered on three sides and open only to the east, a narrow stream curved through the center. It wrapped around a stretch of flat ground, enough space for a shelter, a corral, and whatever two people might build with time. It was distant from settlements, yet not so remote that survival felt impossible. Naya stepped ahead, eyes fixed on the valley. It's peaceful, she said. It's forgotten land, Caleb replied. Most riders pass it without seeing it. Is it safe? As safe as anywhere, he said. Easier to defend than canyon trails. She moved down the slope carefully, mindful of her ankle. Reaching the stream, she crouched and let her fingers trail through the water. It was cool, clean. She splashed some onto her face, letting it run freely. Caleb watched and saw something he hadn't seen since the waterfall. Real relief, visible and unguarded. She stood, smoothing her damp hands over her dress. I could live here, she said softly, if that's something we're considering. Caleb approached slowly. I wasn't planning to settle, he admitted, but plans don't have to stay fixed. She turned fully toward him, coat tied at her waist, dark hair drying unevenly in the warm breeze. She looked stronger now, still cautious, but no longer ready to flee at every sound. Yesterday I was running for my life, she said. Today I'm standing somewhere that feels like it belongs to someone who survived. You survived, Caleb said. So did you. He lowered his gaze briefly. He had never thought of himself that way, only as someone enduring, but her presence softened the sharp weight of what he carried. She stepped closer. You helped me when you could have turned away. I won't forget that. You gave me something too, he said quietly. A reason to stop moving. She searched his face and found no doubt. Slowly she placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. The touch was gentle, certain. Caleb stayed still, letting her choose the distance. When she didn't pull away, he lifted his hand and rested it lightly at her back. Careful, unhurried. You're not alone anymore, she said. Neither are you, he answered. They stood by the stream, unhurried. The silence between them wasn't guarded now. It was chosen. After a long moment, Naya looked toward a flat stretch near the trees. If we clear those stones, We could build a shelter, she said. Stronger than old crows. We can start whenever you want, Caleb said. Today, she replied. I want today. He nodded. Then today, it is. He led Ash into the shade of a juniper, while Naya began gathering smaller stones, marking the foundation line. Her pace was slow at first, her ankle reminding her, but her movements were steady, deliberate. Caleb joined her, lifting heavier stones and setting them aside. Their work fell into rhythm without instruction, without friction. Just quiet cooperation. Light shifted across the valley, turning the grass deep gold. Caleb straightened and watched her adjust a line of stones. There was calm strength in her posture now, certainty that hadn't been there before. You're sure about staying? He asked. Yes, she said without looking up. Are you? He stepped closer until she faced him. I am. Her breath caught, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar, stability. Caleb raised his hand slowly, letting her see it before he touched her cheek. She didn't step back. Her eyes softened, and she leaned into his palm, accepting the contact with quiet trust. She closed the small space between them. Then this is our beginning, she said. Caleb rested his forehead against hers. It is. They stayed that way for several seconds, grounded by everything they'd survived and everything they were choosing to build. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, they returned to their work, shaping the land one stone at a time. The valley had changed. It was no longer a hiding place or a passage between dangers. It was becoming a home, built deliberately, with intention and hope. For the first time in years, Caleb saw a future that didn't involve running. And for the first time since the Black Spur Gang tore her from Red Mesa, Naya felt anchored to something she had chosen, not escaped. They ended the day with half a foundation laid, ash grazing nearby, and a small fire crackling beneath the open sky. They had found safety, belonging, each other. No doubts left unspoken, no paths unfinished. The life ahead of them would be theirs, freely chosen. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.